Now back to the show. This is You and the Law with Sterling Fox on AM 650.
Welcome back to the program. We're talking about insurance claims with Joe Murphy and Scott Stanley from the law firm Murphy Battista, LLP in Vancouver. If you or someone you know has been seriously injured, Murphy Battista can help. To learn more about what they offer, you can check them out online at murphybattista.com. And Scott, you were saying in our first segment, talking about when a person who has been injured, who needs some legal help or is in that gray area where they're not sure whether they need legal help or not, they certainly would appreciate some advice. You said you can go to a website, for example, and you can check out whether a lawyer, for example, has ever been to court and if they've won a case or not. And then those cases are available to be reviewed. You've had a big win, which I'm sure is on somebody's website somewhere in the last month or two. Tell us about yours.
Well, it's actually not on the court website because it's a jury trial, and they don't track jury trial wins.
Oh, really?
Because there's no written reasons that come from them. So
because the jury makes the decision.
That's right.
Right, okay.
That's right, yeah.
So tell us about it.
Yeah, we had a really nice client we were representing. He had worked at a company for over 20 years, and he was involved in what seemed at the time to be a fairly minor accident. And he developed headaches, really, really bad, disabling headaches. And I've actually never seen a case like this involving headaches this bad. But this fellow's headaches were bad to the point where he couldn't do anything for more than an hour or two. And he would just have these throbbing migraine headaches. And the experts in the case said the headaches at this level are as bad as a spinal cord injury. They're more disabling than a spinal cord injury. And it's a case where ICBC offered a lot of money, but just not enough money for this fella to put his life in order. And so he
Because he wasn't able to work then, right? If you can only concentrate for an hour, then you have to stop because your head is about to blow apart. Then you got to stop working,
This
right?
fellow couldn't work. This fellow couldn't even mow his own lawn.
Wow, okay.
And the ICBC, they didn't have any, they sent him to an expert and they didn't have any evidence to counter this at all. So it was, what we said the case was about was true. And it's a case where ICBC offered a lot of money, but they didn't offer enough money for this fella to set his life in order because he's a young guy. He's 43 years old. He's going to have to work for the rest of his life. And so we decided to take his case to trial, or he made that decision, and he ended up getting a judgment over the ICBC policy limits. So and that's never a good thing for the person who's being sued. Right?
I would think not.
Yeah,
no.
so there's...
And is this because of the jury? Does the jury generally have a little more flexibility in terms of stepping beyond where ICBC's limits would be, for example?
Well, they don't know what ICBC's limits are, and the judge that decides a case wouldn't know either. But, this is a case where the jury came back with a result which was actually very similar to what I thought a judge would come back with, and sometimes the juries are really high or really low, but this decision was bang on, and it was more than the insurance money that was available. Now, in a case like this, because I haven't signed one of these little agreements with ICBC, and a lot of lawyers that do plaintiff work are also representing ICBC, they're not able to go after ICBC for that extra money over and above the policy limits. But because I haven't signed that restrictive agreement, I can do that.
So now, Joe, help us out here. This is a fascinating story. Congratulations on the win, by the way, Scott.
Good win for the client. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and you steered it through the system. But Joe, what percentage of lawyers in the personal injury field are, as Scott has just described, in a position where they represent plaintiffs, injured people, and from time to time, ICBC? So they work both sides of the street.
Sterling, my guess would be around 20 to 25%, but the key with those lawyers is ICBC has them every year sign an agreement, which has all the terms, and one of the terms is that this lawyer, if he's acting against ICBC, won't threaten them, won't go after them for not doing what they're supposed to do under the policy. So this is an agreement which, in a sense, restricts what the lawyer can do when he's acting for a client against ICBC, but invariably that client is unaware that the lawyer has signed this agreement that that restricts what they can do.
Is the lawyer duty-bound to reveal to the client that I do represent from time to time ICBC, and I have signed an agreement with those people, which may inhibit my ability to defend you to the utmost in this case?
There's a debate in the legal profession about that, but the Law Society hasn't said to these lawyers, you must disclose this.
So here we go, Scott. Here's another responsibility on the civilian walking in off the street, and in your case, you deal with personal injuries and some pretty shattered people. They're looking for legal advice. They're looking for a helping hand. They're looking for professional input, and now they have to know, they've got to find out whether you're legit, whether you can go to court, whether you win when you go to court. And I suppose now it's the onus is now on the consumer to go, well, do you from time to time also work for ICBC? Is the ball in our court to ask our lawyers these questions?
I don't think it is, but the good thing, Sterling, is a lot of clients actually do ask that question, but I'd say half of them don't, or more than half of them don't. The Law Society hasn't given a firm directive on this, but my interpretation is that the lawyer who's representing ICBC and has signed one of these agreements would have to disclose that to the client, and so the client could make a choice. And they'd have to explain to the client, okay, I've signed this agreement with ICBC. This will restrict me to do these various things for you. Now,
I've got to play nice with them because I work for them sometimes.
Well, it in most cases, it may not affect their ability to properly represent the client, but in the case that I was describing, it certainly would.
Okay.
Because in that case, I'd given ICBC several opportunities to settle the claim for all the policy limits. They chose to take the risk to go to trial. I ended up getting a judgment for more than the policy limits, and because I hadn't signed this agreement, I was free to go after ICBC for the extra money.
Sure.
Or my client was with my guidance. Now, that doesn't happen that often, but my interpretation is that a lawyer would definitely have to disclose that to their clients.
Right. Now, Joe, when someone comes to Murphy Battista, and again, you're not talking about some casual conversation with somebody who just slides in to talk about life. You're talking about people with grievances, and in some cases, some pretty serious injuries, many of them lifelong. How do you help them sort through this maze of legalities in order to get to the nuts and bolts of why they're there to see you in the first place?
Well, the reality, Sterling, is these people come along, they need to make a very important decision, and in most cases don't know the questions to ask,
Absolutely.
Don't know how the system operates.
Sure.
And I think a good comparison is if I need brain surgery, would I be capable of going out and interviewing 2 or 3 or 4 brain surgeons and choosing the best one? And the answer is, of course not.
Right, of course.
I would have to rely on my family doctor or one of my specialists to refer me to someone who's really good.
Right.
So it's not surprising these people don't know where to go, they don't know the questions to ask, and they don't know how to research who the lawyers are. Now, there are organizations that will say to people, here's a list of lawyers, and we think any of these would do a good job for you.
Right.
But quite often people are left, they might hire the family lawyer, they might hire a lawyer who's back in their hometown, because people who are badly injured almost invariably end up in Vancouver. They almost invariably go through GF Strong, but some of those people think, well, I live in the north, I live somewhere else, I want to have a lawyer there, and they choose a lawyer who doesn't have the experience and who may do defense work.
Right.
So, but they're really in the dark, and they don't know the questions to ask. They don't know where to go. And sometimes they make decisions that are wrong. It's quite common in our firm that we take over cases where the client has gotten so far down the road and decided, I haven't made the best decision in a lawyer I've hired.
Okay. So you pick up
they decide to move the file. That fairly common with the bigger cases, because people over time realize that the case isn't being handled the way they think it it might be handled.
So if for example, Scott, if a person from the North Country is down here and they've got that small town lawyer back home who just doesn't know how to play the game properly or well enough to get the job done, and they come to Murphy Battista and sit down and retain your services, does that lawyer in the small town back home, is that person now completely out of the picture, or do they from time to time remain in some kind of loop as the case goes forward?
Well, for the most part, they're out of the case.
Okay.
And it's actually quite easy to switch lawyers, because what happens is the two lawyers, basically, in most cases, Sterling, the two lawyers agree on whatever the client initially agreed to pay. The lawyers agree that the total fee will be that amount, no more, and then they sort it out amongst themselves. So it's very easy for the client to switch. What happens is a lot of lawyers in small towns, I mean, there's some very good lawyers up there. Some excellent lawyers in small areas, but a lot of times they're doing a mixed bag of things because the economy dictates they have to do that. And when you get a real complex case, sometimes people need the resources of a bigger firm to properly handle the case.
Absolutely. And talk to us, if you would, both, please, about fiduciary duties. What are, Joe, fiduciary duties, and particularly as they would apply to a law firm like Murphy Battista?
Well, I think what a fiduciary duty is it's the duty that a lawyer owes the client when the client has put his life in the lawyer's hands.
All right.
And the client, and the lawyer knows that the client has put their life in his or her hands. And what it means is the lawyer has got to put the interests of the client before anyone else's, including the lawyer's own interests.
Now, if you're putting someone's life in the hands of a lawyer, would this? I'm inferring perhaps too much here, Joe, but would that be you place your life in a lawyer's hands because your life is so shattered you have no choice, you can't carry on as you once could?
Well, yes, the answer is yes, and the reality is there's a huge difference between a young child, brain injured in an accident,
right,
and an adult who had a sore neck for a couple of months following an accident. There's a huge difference.
Of course, yeah.
And the brain-injured child's parents go out and hire a lawyer, and that family, that child and that family has placed their lives in the lawyer's hands, and it places a huge responsibility on the lawyer to make sure that the child's interests come first.
Now, all of these duties and attitudes, I'm assuming, Scott, that you and Joe are like-minded because Murphy Battista approaches their clients and their clients' needs in a certain way. Or is this profession-wide?
Well, every lawyer, at the very least, owes a fiduciary duty to their clients. They owe at least that, and the duty they owe are probably much greater than that. But it's province-wide. Every lawyer in every situation will owe a fiduciary duty to their client.
Okay. So in that, we need to take a break here. So I'll take a couple of minutes and think a little bit about what a person, what a customer, a client can legitimately expect because of this fiduciary duty that lawyers have to their clients. What is the flip of that coin? What expectations, reasonable expectations, can a client have based on those duties? Our guests are Joe Murphy and Scott Stanley. We're talking Murphy Battista, LLP, and insurance claims on this edition of You and the Law here on AM 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is You and the Law on AM 650.